A lone stone arch stands silent in an empty desert. This was once Palmyra, a city of unimaginable wealth and power, and its story defies everything you expect from the ancient world. We are about to uncover 30 of its most incredible secrets, from a warrior queen who challenged Rome to gods whose names were forgotten, and a downfall so sudden it echoes through history. By the end, you will see the ancient map redrawn, revealing an empire built on secrets. How did a single oasis create a global trading titan, and what fatal miscalculation turned it all to dust? What forgotten city from the past captures your imagination the most? That lone stone arch stands as a monument to an empire born from water. The true first secret of Palmyra was not its gold or its armies, but its location. It was a deliberate masterpiece of geography, an oasis that should not have existed in such a barren landscape. This was no random patch of sand. It was the ultimate pit stop on the ancient world's greatest highway, the Silk Road. Imagine the endless caravans stretching to the horizon, all converging on this single, miraculous point. They carried silk from China, spices from India, and jewels from lands barely known to Rome. Every single one of them needed what Palmyra alone could provide in that vast desert: water, food, and shelter. But how did a city support such immense traffic in the middle of a desert? The answer lies beneath the sand, in a web of hidden arteries known as canals. These were not simple wells, they were underground canals, brilliant feats of engineering that tapped into distant underground water sources. Workers dug deep vertical shafts down to the water table, then connected them with gently sloping tunnels that used gravity to guide the water for miles, all hidden from the evaporating sun. This was a secret water grid, a life support system that turned a desperate stop into a thriving metropolis. It was this hidden network that allowed Palmyra to become the vital heart, the indispensable middleman between two colossal empires, Rome to the west and Parthia to the east. Every merchant paid a toll, every caravan paid for protection, and every transaction made the city richer. The wealth of the world flowed through its gates because its founders mastered a simple, brutal secret: how to find water where there seemed to be none. This hidden water grid created an economic powerhouse unlike any other. The wealth of entire kingdoms flowed through the markets of Palmyra, but this was not a simple free-for-all. The city's true power was held by a small group of secretive merchant guilds and powerful families who operated like ancient corporations. They did not just move goods, they controlled them. Imagine a single caravan, 1,000 camels long, winding its way from the Persian Gulf. It carried pepper and cinnamon from India, pearls from the Gulf, and the most coveted fabric in the ancient world, Chinese silk. Before a single bale of silk could be traded to Rome, it had to pass through the hands of Palmyran merchants. These families imposed their own taxes and tariffs on every item, a sophisticated system of fees for protection, for warehouse storage, and for the simple rite of passage. This was the city's brilliant economic secret. They did not produce the luxury, they controlled the valve. The gold and silver collected from this mercantile toll built a skyline that stunned the ancient world. Grand colonnades lined with statues of these very merchants stretched for miles. A theater rivaling those in Rome itself hosted performances paid for by spice tariffs. Temples to both Eastern and Western gods, financed by the silk trade, rose from the desert sand. This fusion of cultures was not an accident, it was a direct result of the city's unique position. A Palmyran noble could wear a Roman toga, worship a Mesopotamian god like Bel, and conduct business in Greek, all while his wealth was secured by taxing Indian spices. The city itself became a physical manifestation of its trade, a breathtaking blend of East and West paid for by its absolute command over the world's most precious luxuries. But such immense wealth and power never goes unnoticed for long. It was only a matter of time before a distant empire would cast a hungry eye on this desert jewel. All that wealth and power demanded a spiritual anchor, a divine foundation for a city built on sand. At the heart of Palmyra's identity was a secret religious code, embodied by three powerful gods known as the Divine Triad. This was not a simple pantheon of imported deities. It was a masterful fusion, a theological creation as unique as the city itself, blending Mesopotamian, Arabian, and Greco-Roman beliefs into a single cohesive force. The supreme ruler of this celestial court was Bel. He was not merely a local god, he was the lord of the cosmos, the creator of the world. To the Romans, he was Jupiter. To the Greeks, he was Zeus, but in Palmyra, he was Bel, an ancient name echoing from Mesopotamia, now presiding over a desert empire. His temple was the city's grandest structure, a colossal symbol of his authority where the fate of the universe was believed to be decided. Serving alongside him were two brothers, two forces that balanced the very rhythm of life. Yahibol was the first, a fierce solar god. He was not just the sun in the sky, he was the sun that brought forth water from the sacred Efka spring, the lifeblood of the oasis. He was also a god of justice, his piercing light revealing truth and punishing falsehood. His partner was Aglibol, the serene lunar god. With his crescent moon crown, he represented the night, the passage of time, and the gentle, cooling counterpoint to his brother's fiery power. Together, the sun and the moon orbited the creator, a perfect celestial family. This triad was Palmyra's ultimate spiritual secret. A merchant could pray to Bel for success on a journey, make an oath in the name of the just Yahibol, and thank the gentle Aglibol for a safe night's rest. Their worship was a practical, daily part of life in a city that connected worlds. The great Temple of Bel was more than a building, it was the city's soul, a place where East and West did not just meet, they worshipped together. But such a unique identity would soon be tested, not by gods, but by the ambitions of an earthly queen and the legions of an impatient empire. But the soul of this cosmopolitan crossroads was not spoken in the language of emperors or foreign merchants. Carved into the very stones of those grand colonnades and temple walls is a linguistic secret, the unique script of Palmyran Aramaic. While Greek was the language of business and Latin the tongue of distant legions, the city's heart beat in this distinct dialect. It was the language of the home, of the market stall, and of sacred oaths sworn to the gods. The script itself was a work of art, an alphabet born from ancient Phoenician roots, with 22 elegant, angular letters perfectly suited for being chiseled into stone. This was not a secret code, but a public declaration of identity. Thousands upon thousands of these inscriptions have survived the centuries, and they offer us something priceless, a direct, unfiltered window into the minds of the Palmyrans. We are not reading about them through the biased accounts of Roman historians. We are hearing their own voices. A simple funerary relief shows a wealthy woman named Halifat, her image carved in stone, and the text below does not just state her name. It tells us she was the daughter of Ojulu and that her own son, sadly, erected this monument. In that one inscription, we see family lineage, personal grief, and the social custom of honoring the dead, all from a single, heartfelt source. We read legal contracts etched in stone, binding agreements between families over property and water rights, showing a sophisticated and documented system of law. We find religious dedications where merchants thank the god Bel for a safe journey, promising a portion of their profits in return for his divine protection. Every carved line is a piece of the city's living story, a testament to a people who were fiercely proud of their unique culture even as they engaged with the world. This was their true voice, preserved not on fragile papyrus, but in the enduring stone of their desert home, waiting for centuries to be read again. This unique voice, etched in stone, found its ultimate expression in the city's skyline. Palmyra's architecture was a breathtaking secret recipe, a visual language where East truly met West. The architects of this desert metropolis were not mere copyists, they were brilliant synthesizers. They saw the grand columns of Rome and the intricate patterns of Persia not as opposing styles, but as a new palette to create something entirely their own. The most stunning example of this was the Grand Colonnade, a central artery stretching over 1 kilometer through the heart of the city. At first glance, a Roman engineer would have felt at home, recognizing the long, covered walkway supported by massive columns, a hallmark of imperial city planning. But a closer look reveals a different story. The columns were not plain. They were adorned with distinctive brackets or consoles high up on their shafts, and on these brackets stood statues. This was not a Roman custom. This was an Eastern tradition, a way for the city's wealthy merchant families to immortalize themselves, to literally look down upon the bustling crowds below, their stone eyes watching over the trade that made them rich. This was a street designed by Rome but personalized by Palmyra, a public space that also served as a gallery of its most powerful citizens. This fusion reached its zenith in the Temple of Bel. From the outside, it followed the classic plan of a Roman temple, set within a vast rectangular courtyard, but step inside the main sanctuary and the rules changed completely. Instead of a single, long hall leading to a statue of the god, the inner chamber was divided into 2 separate shrines, a layout echoing much older Semitic and Mesopotamian temples. The ceiling was not a flat Roman coffered one, but a soaring, barrel-vaulted ceiling that felt more at home in Parthian Persia. Even the stonework itself held a secret. The massive blocks were so perfectly cut and fitted together that they required no mortar, a technique mastered by Eastern builders long before the Romans arrived. And then there were the tombs. Rising from the desert plains were the famous tower tombs, multi-leveled stone skyscrapers for the dead. Their design was profoundly Parthian, a style from the rival empire to the east, yet they were filled with sculptures and inscriptions in Palmyran Aramaic, depicting the deceased in hybrid Greco-Roman clothing. This architectural genius was the city's physical manifesto. It declared to the world that Palmyra was not a provincial Roman outpost, nor was it a purely Eastern kingdom. It was a third thing, a confident, sophisticated blend that answered to its own unique identity. This visual harmony, however, was a delicate balance, one that would soon be shattered by a ruler whose ambition knew no such subtlety. This architectural confidence extended even to the realm of the dead, where eternity was secured in stone. Rising from the desert floor like silent sentinels were the legendary tomb towers, the ultimate symbol of a family's wealth and status. These were not simple graves, they were multi-story skyscrapers for the deceased, some reaching 5 levels high. Built from massive blocks of golden limestone, each level was divided into narrow compartments, or loculi, where the wrapped bodies of family members were laid to rest. A single tower could hold the remains of hundreds of individuals across many generations, a permanent, towering claim on the landscape that declared a family's name would never be forgotten. The interiors were just as elaborate, with stone banqueting halls where living relatives would gather for ritual feasts to honor their ancestors, maintaining a bond between the living and the dead. But for those who preferred a different kind of eternity, there was another option hidden beneath the sand. Descending below the city were the hypogee, vast underground palaces of the dead. Carved directly into the bedrock, these labyrinthine chambers were cool, dark, and breathtakingly ornate. Their walls were covered in vibrant frescoes depicting scenes of feasting, hunting, and mythology, their colors preserved for centuries by the desert's dry air. Life-sized sculptures of the deceased, often reclining as if at a banquet, populated these silent halls, their stone eyes staring out into an endless night. Why did they invest such immense fortune and artistry in these houses for the dead? The answer lies in a profound belief in an afterlife that mirrored the world of the living. Death was not an end, but a transition to a different state of existence, one where you would still need a home, receive visitors, and enjoy the comforts you had in life. The frescoes of banquets were not just decoration, they were a magical provision of eternal sustenance. The stone portraits ensured the person's identity and memory would live on, forever young and powerful. Every dinar spent on a tomb tower or a painted hypogee was an investment in a permanent, comfortable afterlife. In a city built on the shifting sands of trade, these eternal homes were the one investment that would never lose its value, a final, unshakable monument to a culture that believed in building for forever. This intricate balance between cultural identity and political survival defined Palmyra's most delicate secret, its status as a client kingdom of Rome. For centuries, the city's rulers performed a masterful political tightrope walk, maintaining a public face of loyal alliance with the Roman Empire while fiercely guarding their own autonomy behind the scenes. Officially, Palmyra was a friend and ally of the Roman people, a formal title that granted them extraordinary privileges. In exchange for guarding Rome's volatile eastern frontier from the rival Parthian Empire, the city was largely left to govern itself. It collected its own taxes, enforced its own laws, and its merchant princes grew unimaginably wealthy from the trade they controlled, all under the nominal umbrella of Roman power. This arrangement was a secret recipe for success, allowing Palmyra to flourish as a semi-independent state. The relationship was deeply pragmatic. The Roman military, always in need of skilled specialists, highly valued the legendary Palmyran archers. These soldiers, renowned for their accuracy and powerful composite bows, served as auxiliary units in the Roman army, stationed as far away as Britain and Dacia. A tombstone for a Palmyran soldier named Barret's, found in northern England, tells this story perfectly. He served Rome, yet he was buried under an inscription in his native Palmyran Aramaic, a quiet testament to a dual identity. Back in the city, the political structures remained distinctly Palmyran. A council of elders and powerful clan leaders made the key decisions, not a Roman governor. They managed the caravan routes, negotiated with foreign powers, and built their grand monuments with their own wealth, not Roman gold. For generations, this system worked brilliantly. Rome got a stable, buffered frontier and a steady supply of elite soldiers. Palmyra got peace, protection, and the freedom to become one of the richest cities on earth. But such a delicate balance is always fragile. It relied entirely on a mutual understanding and a stable Roman Empire. What would happen if that empire fractured, or if a Palmyran leader decided the tightrope was no longer worth walking? The secret recipe for success contained the very seeds of its own destruction. This delicate political balancing act finally shattered with the rise of Palmyra's most legendary ruler, a queen whose very identity was her first and greatest secret. Zenobia did not just rule, she rewrote her own origin story to command the world stage. In a bold claim that echoed across the empire, she declared herself a direct descendant of Cleopatra VII of Egypt. This was not a quiet family rumor, it was a powerful public proclamation designed to shock and legitimize. Imagine the audacity of a desert queen from a trading city claiming the bloodline of the most famous Ptolemaic pharaoh. The question, of course, is whether it was true. Most historians see it as a brilliant political fiction, a masterstroke of propaganda. Cleopatra was a symbol of Eastern resistance to Roman domination, a figure of immense cultural prestige and political cunning. By linking herself to this legacy, Zenobia was not just boasting about royal blood. She was crafting a persona, framing herself as the rightful heir to a tradition of powerful female rulers who could stand against Rome. This invented lineage became the foundation for her most ambitious move, the invasion of Egypt itself. When her armies marched into the Roman province of Egypt, it was not merely a military campaign, it was a homecoming in narrative. She was, according to her own story, reclaiming the land of her illustrious ancestor. This fabricated past was a tool, a psychological weapon as sharp as any sword, used to justify her expansion and rally support. It gave her the aura of destiny, transforming her from the widow of a local king into a pharaoh in waiting, a queen whose right to rule stretched back centuries. Her entire image, from her reported intellect to her alleged beauty, was polished to mirror the image of Cleopatra, creating a legend so powerful it would eclipse the truth for centuries to come. Zenobia's fabricated lineage was merely the opening move in a far grander and more dangerous game of conquest. Her true secret lay not in her claimed ancestry, but in her unparalleled military mind, a strategic genius that allowed her to forge a brief but breathtaking empire from the sands of Syria. With Rome plunged into a period of internal chaos, the so-called crisis of the 3rd century, she saw a power vacuum and moved with stunning speed and precision. Her first major campaign was a masterclass in ambition and logistics, the audacious invasion of the Roman province of Egypt. This was no mere border raid. Securing Egypt meant controlling the grain supply that fed the city of Rome itself, a chokehold on the empire's stomach. Her forces, a blend of Palmyran elite troops and local allies, swept into the province, defeating the Roman garrison and securing the legendary city of Alexandria. In one bold stroke, she transformed her realm from a powerful trading state into a Mediterranean superpower, directly challenging Roman supremacy. Her armies then turned north, marching deep into Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, conquering territories as far as the shores of the Bosporus. The map of the Roman East was being redrawn under her command. The engine of this lightning expansion was the legendary Palmyran cavalry, the cavalry. These were not ordinary horsemen. They were the precursors to the medieval knight, so heavily armored that both rider and steed were covered in interlocking scales of iron and bronze, appearing almost as metallic giants on the battlefield. They wielded the contos, a massive lance requiring 2 hands to use, and could shatter enemy lines with the force of a thunderous, rolling wall of steel. Supporting them were the renowned Palmyran archers, whose skill with the composite bow was unmatched. They could unleash a storm of arrows with terrifying accuracy, softening enemy formations before the heavy cavalry delivered the final, crushing blow. Zenobia herself was the architect of these victories, a commander who understood how to deploy her unique forces for maximum effect. She did not just lead armies, she orchestrated them, using speed, intimidation, and brilliant tactical combinations to overwhelm her opponents. For a few brief years, the Palmyran Empire stood as a colossal rival to Rome, a testament to one woman's vision and her army's unmatched prowess. But such a direct challenge could not go unanswered forever. The very might she had so cleverly exploited was now stirring, and a new Roman emperor was rising with a single, grim purpose: to erase her and her desert kingdom from history. Zenobia's lightning conquests were a declaration of war Rome could no longer ignore. The empire had been bleeding from internal crises, but her audacious seizure of Egypt and invasion of Anatolia were steps too far. The turning point came with the rise of a new, iron-willed emperor, Aurelian, a soldier whose entire career was built on restoring Roman order through sheer, uncompromising force. He saw Zenobia's expanding empire not as a rebellion, but as a mortal threat that had to be excised. The secret of Palmyra's downfall was not a lack of courage or military skill, but a fatal miscalculation of Roman resilience. Zenobia had overplayed her hand, believing a fractured Rome would remain fractured. Aurelian proved her catastrophically wrong. He marched east with the full, reforged might of the Roman legions, a force honed by decades of civil war, and he was not coming to negotiate. The two armies met in a series of pitched battles across the plains of Syria. The legendary Palmyran heavy cavalry, the cavalry, thundered across the field, a seemingly unstoppable wave of steel. But Aurelian was a master tactician. He adapted, using feigned retreats and disciplined infantry formations to draw the heavy cavalry into traps, disrupting their devastating charges. The core of Zenobia's army began to crumble. Forced to retreat, the queen and her remaining forces fell back to the impregnable walls of Palmyra itself, preparing for a siege. They believed their city, with its massive fortifications and desert location, could outlast any Roman army, but Aurelian surrounded the city, cutting it off from the caravan routes that were its lifeblood. The secret water network, the canals that had sustained the city for centuries, became a liability as the Romans could potentially locate and poison or block the distant sources. Inside the walls, hope dwindled with each passing day. Desperate, Zenobia attempted a daring escape on a fast camel, hoping to reach Persia and secure aid from Rome's eternal rival. She was captured by Roman scouts at the Euphrates River. Her capture broke the city's spirit. Palmyra, without its queen and with its supplies exhausted, had no choice but to surrender. The revolt was over. Aurelian initially showed a degree of mercy, perhaps recognizing the city's value. He left a garrison and departed, but the spirit of defiance was not yet extinguished. The following year, the Palmyrans rose once more, slaughtering the Roman garrison. This final act of rebellion sealed the city's fate. Aurelian returned not as a conqueror but as an avenger. His legions were ordered to sack the city, to tear down its walls, and to reduce its grand monuments to rubble. The great trading metropolis, the city of 1,000 caravans, was systematically dismantled, its wealth plundered, its power broken forever. The revolt was the ultimate secret tragedy, a story of breathtaking ambition that collided with the unyielding reality of imperial power. The shadow of Zenobia's rebellion was cast long before by the shocking and unresolved murder of her husband. King Odenathus was not an enemy of Rome, but its greatest champion in the East, the one man who had successfully beaten back the Persian threat and restored order during the empire's darkest hour. His assassination, alongside his eldest son and heir, is the political murder mystery that forever altered the destiny of Palmyra. The facts are stark and tragic. While celebrating a military campaign in Anatolia, perhaps even his own birthday, Odenathus and his son Herodion were killed. The killer was reportedly a close relative, perhaps even his nephew. But the question that has echoed for centuries is not who held the blade, but who truly held the strings. The first theory points directly to Rome. Odenathus had become too powerful, too indispensable. He had been granted unprecedented titles and authority by a desperate empire, but as he crushed Rome's enemies, he built a personal army fiercely loyal only to him. Could a faction in Rome, possibly even the new Emperor Gallienus himself, have decided this powerful ally was now a greater threat than the Persians? Eliminating him would neatly remove a potential rival and weaken Palmyra in a single, bloody stroke. Then there is the Persian angle. The Sasanian Empire had suffered humiliating defeats at the hands of Odenathus, who had marched his army to the very gates of their capital, Ctesiphon. His death would have been a monumental intelligence victory for Persia, a way to decapitate the one military force they truly feared. An assassination, cleverly framed to look like a Roman or internal Palmyran plot, would be the perfect strategic move. But the most tantalizing and controversial theory comes from the ancient historians themselves. Some sources quietly whispered that Zenobia was involved, fearing that her own son from a previous marriage was being sidelined in the line of succession. Did she see the removal of her husband and his heir as the only path to securing power for herself and her own bloodline? It is a dark and compelling narrative, but one that many modern historians view with suspicion, noting that Roman writers had every reason to vilify the woman who later defied them. The truth died with the king in that Anatolian camp. This single, unsolved crime shattered the stability Odenathus had built and thrust a grieving widow onto the throne, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to glory and then to utter ruin. The city's astonishing water management system was a masterpiece of desert survival. This network was far more than a few wells. It was an artificial river system engineered to defy the very nature of the landscape. At its heart were the canals, those hidden underground canals, but they were just one part of a vast and complex hydraulic web. Engineers built long aqueducts to capture water from distant mountain springs, channeling it for miles across the arid plains into the city. Once this precious water arrived, it was stored in massive, plaster-lined reservoirs that acted as the city's strategic water bank, holding enough to withstand long periods of drought. This hidden infrastructure was the true lifeblood of Palmyra, a secret circulatory system that allowed the city to breathe and thrive. But the genius did not stop at the city walls. This same water was then carefully distributed through a network of canals and channels to irrigate a green belt of farms and palm groves encircling the metropolis. In the shadow of grand colonnades, farmers cultivated olives, figs, wheat, and vineyards, transforming the barren outskirts into a productive agricultural zone. This is how Palmyra supported a population estimated to be over 200,000 people, a number utterly inconceivable for a desert location without such intervention. The water system was the city's foundational secret, the invisible engine that powered everything else, from the wealth of the merchant princes to the daily bread of its citizens. Without this hidden grid of water, the caravans would have passed by a minor oasis, and the legend of Palmyra would never have been written. Carved into a massive slab of limestone, we find the city's economic heart laid bare. This is the famous tariff law of Palmyra, a 2,000-year-old tax code that reads like a merchant's ledger brought to life. Discovered in 1901, this 4-column inscription in Palmyran Aramaic and Greek is one of the most detailed economic documents to survive from the entire ancient world. Dated precisely to 137 AD, it was not a secret law, but a public declaration of the city's commercial rules posted for all traders to see. And within its lines lies the secret blueprint of how Palmyra turned global trade into a precise, predictable, and immensely profitable science. The law meticulously lists hundreds of goods and the exact tax due on each one. A merchant bringing in olive oil paid 1 denarius for every container. A load of dried fish was taxed at a rate of 1 denarius per load. Even common goods like wheat and barley had their set fees, ensuring that every single item passing through the gates contributed to the city's treasury. But the real revenue came from the high-value luxuries that defined the Silk Road. The most expensive perfume, a tiny vial of spikenard from the Himalayas, was taxed at a staggering 25 denarii. A single bronze statue imported from Greece carried a tax of 22 denarii. And then there was the trade in human beings, a grim reality of the ancient economy. The law coldly specifies the tariff for a male slave at 22 denarii and for a female slave at 12 denarii. This was not a haphazard system of bribes and arbitrary fees. It was a sophisticated, codified, and transparent economic engine. The law even detailed who was responsible for paying, the penalties for evasion, and how the taxes were to be collected by the city's appointed officials. This stone tablet reveals a legal and commercial sophistication that rivaled Rome itself, proving that Palmyra's wealth was not an accident of geography, but the direct result of a brilliantly managed and ruthlessly efficient economic machine. Every taxed jar of oil and every taxed bale of silk was a small thread in the vast golden tapestry of the city's prosperity, a system so well designed it could be etched in stone for eternity. Even the gods of Palmyra had their secrets. Scattered among the grand inscriptions to Bel and the divine triad, archaeologists have uncovered something deeply mysterious. Dedications carved not for a named deity, but for one referred to only as he whose name is blessed forever. This anonymous god stands as a silent, puzzling figure in a city otherwise filled with vivid divine personalities. Who was this unnamed power, and why would a people so comfortable with carving their gods in stone choose to worship one without a face or a name? The theories are as fascinating as the mystery itself. Some scholars see this as evidence of a quiet monotheistic trend, a philosophical movement towards the idea of a single, all-powerful supreme being that existed alongside the traditional pantheon. In this view, the anonymous god was a force beyond human categorization, a divine unity that could not be confined to a single name or a statue. Other interpretations suggest this was a profound act of spiritual precaution. In the ancient world, names held immense power. To know a god's true name was to have a certain measure of influence over it, and conversely, to use the wrong name or title could risk divine offense. By worshipping a god whose name was eternally blessed but forever unspoken, the Palmyrans may have been ensuring they never made a fatal mistake, honoring the ultimate divine power without the risk of getting its name wrong. This practice reveals a layer of deep theological sophistication beneath the city's cosmopolitan surface. It shows a society that was not just blending different cultures, but actively questioning the very nature of the divine, exploring ideas that reached far beyond the familiar stories of sun and moon gods. The cult of the anonymous god reminds us that the spiritual life of Palmyra was not set in stone, but was a living, evolving conversation, one that occasionally reached for a mystery so vast it could only be addressed in a reverent whisper. The power of the Palmyran cavalry was a secret Rome was willing to pay for. These were not ordinary horsemen, but a specialized military class whose very name struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. They were called the Cleopatra, a Latin word that some scholars believe translates to the men of the oven, a grimly fitting name for warriors who fought under the blistering desert sun while encased from head to toe in metal. They were the ancient world's equivalent of a tank division, the direct precursors to the armored knights of medieval Europe. Each rider and his horse were a single, integrated weapon system. The warrior wore a suit of chainmail or scale armor that covered his entire body, often with a full-face helmet that left only a narrow slit for vision. His horse was similarly protected by chamfrons of boiled leather or metal to guard its head and pectorals of linked mail across its chest. This total encasement made them nearly invulnerable to arrows and spears from a distance. Their primary weapon was the contos, a massive lance up to 12 feet long. Unlike a typical spear wielded with one hand, the contos was a two-handed weapon, requiring immense strength and perfect balance. Locked into their high-backed saddles, these riders could couch the lance under their arm, channeling the full momentum of their charging horse directly through the tip of the weapon. The impact was catastrophic, capable of punching straight through an enemy shield wall and scattering infantry formations like leaves in a storm. This was the Desert Storm, a thundering, metallic wave that could decide the outcome of a battle in a single, shattering charge. Rome, for all its legendary legions, had nothing quite like them. This unique capability was the unspoken bargain that secured Palmyra's autonomy for generations. The Roman military machine was pragmatic above all else. They tolerated the city's independent streak, its merchant kings, and its unique culture, because they desperately needed the services of these unparalleled heavy cavalrymen. Palmyran auxiliary units, often led by their own noble commanders, were stationed across the empire from the damp frontiers of Britain to the forests of Germany. They were the empire's elite shock troops, a mobile, armored fist that could be deployed wherever the fighting was thickest. The Cleopatra were more than just soldiers. They were a strategic asset, a military secret so potent that Rome was willing to overlook a great deal of local pride in exchange for their loyalty. As long as the gold flowed and the Cleopatra answered the call, the delicate balance of power could hold. But what happens when the very force that guarantees your independence becomes the spearhead of your rebellion? Behind the grand columns and Greek inscriptions, the true power in Palmyra flowed not through its senate, but through ancient bloodlines. The city's dazzling cosmopolitan surface was underpinned by a secret social engine, a rigid hierarchy of powerful Bedouin tribes and clans. These were not mere family names, they were corporate entities, political parties, and private armies all rolled into one. A man's identity was defined first by his tribe, then his clan, and only finally by his own name. This tribal structure was the invisible skeleton upon which the entire body of the city was built, a social fabric woven from the traditions of the desert. The most powerful of these groups, families with names like the Mazin and the Khmer, did not just live in Palmyra, they effectively owned it. They controlled specific stretches of the caravan routes, passing this lucrative right down from father to son for generations. They financed the caravans, hired the guards, and negotiated the tariffs with foreign powers. When you see a statue of a wealthy merchant on the Grand Colonnade, you are not looking at a self-made man, you are looking at the representative of a dynasty. This fierce tribal loyalty manifested most visibly in the legendary tower tombs. These were not public cemeteries, they were clan fortresses for the dead. When a family built a tomb tower, they were making a permanent, unshakable claim on the landscape, declaring that their lineage would dominate this ground for eternity. The intense rivalry between these great families was the driving force of Palmyran politics. They competed to build the most lavish public monuments, to sponsor the most extravagant religious festivals, and to secure the most influential seats on the city council. This constant, managed competition fueled the city's architectural and cultural boom. Yet this very strength was also its fatal weakness. The clan always came first, even before the city. When external pressure from Rome finally became unbearable, these deeply ingrained tribal loyalties fractured any sense of unified national purpose. Different clans had different allegiances, some siding with Rome, others with Zenobia, and still others looking only to their own survival. The social fabric that had held the city together so brilliantly for centuries began to unravel from within, proving that the most dangerous secrets are often the ones we carry in our blood. The stone faces of the dead hold their own silent conversations across the centuries. In the cool darkness of the tomb towers and hypogee, we find the most intimate secret of Palmyra, the art of the funerary bust. These are not the idealized gods and heroes of Greek or Roman sculpture. They are something entirely different, a unique artistic language carved for eternity. Each bust follows a strict, almost rigid formula. The figure faces directly forward, their gaze meeting ours with an unnerving intensity. Their bodies are blocky and geometric, with shoulders squared and hands often held in simple, symbolic gestures. This frontality was a deliberate choice, a way of presenting the individual without distraction, as if they were eternally present at their own memorial banquet. But within this strict framework, the artists poured an astonishing attention into the details that truly mattered, the details of identity. The wealth of a merchant family is etched into the stone itself. Women are depicted wearing incredible layered necklaces of carved stone pearls, heavy pendant earrings, and elaborate headdresses draped with intricate veils. Men clutch scrolls symbolizing education and authority, or wear ornate cloaks fastened with jeweled brooches. Every ring, every fold of fabric was a public declaration of social standing and success. Yet the true magic lies in the faces. Despite the formal style, the sculptors captured a profound sense of individuality. Here is a man with a gentle smile and soft, fleshy cheeks. Next to him, a woman with a stern, commanding expression and a strong, determined jawline. Another has deeply set, thoughtful eyes that seem to look right through you. These were real people, their personalities frozen in limestone. This was not merely portraiture, it was a legal and social document. In a city built on family lineages and tribal ties, your identity was your most valuable possession. A funerary bust served as a permanent record, a deed of ownership for your place in the afterlife and your lineage in the world of the living. The inscription below would often name not only the deceased but their father, their clan, and sometimes their profession. This stone portrait guaranteed that a merchant named Mael, son of Ojulu of the Mazin tribe, would never be forgotten. His face, his family, and his status were secured against the ravages of time. A final, unbreakable contract written not on papyrus but in the enduring language of art. No grand palace of Zenobia stands among the ruins of Palmyra today. The legendary residence of the warrior queen, a building whispered to have been filled with the plundered gold of Egypt and the silks of Anatolia, has vanished completely. This is one of the city's most tantalizing voids. Was it a separate, sprawling complex on the city's edge, a private royal citadel befitting an empress, or was it simply the most lavish and fortified wing of the city's central administrative complex, a place we now call the Diocletian's camp, which was built decades after her death? Historical sources are frustratingly sparse, but they paint a picture of almost mythical opulence. Ancient chroniclers wrote of Zenobia holding court with the grandeur of a Persian monarch, surrounded by gems and gold, advising a court of philosophers and strategists. They describe a woman who lived in a manner equal to, and perhaps even surpassing, the luxury of Rome itself. If such a palace existed, its fate was likely sealed by the Roman sack. Aurelian's legaries were not gentle victors. A structure so intimately tied to the rebel queen would have been a prime target for systematic looting and then deliberate demolition, its stones torn down to erase the very memory of her reign. The treasures within would have been hauled back to Rome as proof of the emperor's triumph. Yet another possibility is that the palace was not a single building at all, but a collection of opulent residences and audience halls scattered throughout the city, their identity lost when their royal owner fell. The true location of Zenobia's palace remains a ghost in the archaeology, a secret hidden not in the sand but in the silence of the stones themselves. Aurelian's mercy was a fragile thing, a temporary peace born more of pragmatism than forgiveness. He had the rebel queen in chains and the city's treasury plundered, leaving behind a small Roman garrison to ensure the now humbled Palmyra remained quiet. For a few short months, it seemed the city might survive as a provincial town, stripped of its glory but still living. This fragile peace shattered with a final, desperate act of defiance. The spark is lost to history, perhaps a new tax, an insult from the Roman soldiers, or simply the simmering rage of a people who had ruled themselves for centuries. Whatever the cause, the Palmyrans rose up once more. They slaughtered the Roman garrison, declaring their independence for a second time. It was a catastrophic miscalculation, a suicide mission driven by pride. When news reached Emperor Aurelian, his response was swift and absolute. He had offered them a chance to live, and they had spat on his mercy. He turned his legions around and marched back to Palmyra, not as a conqueror this time, but as an avenger. His orders were simple and brutal, to make an example that would echo through the ages. The final sack was systematic and thorough. Roman soldiers poured through the streets, not to plunder for profit, but to destroy for punishment. They tore down the massive defensive walls, leaving the city naked and exposed. They set fire to the grand colonnades, toppling the statues of merchant princes from their brackets. The glorious temple of Bel was desecrated, its altars smashed. Workshops, markets, and public buildings were reduced to rubble. This was not a battle, it was an execution. The Roman legions methodically broke the city's economic backbone, ensuring no caravan would ever trust its safety again. The secret water channels, the qanats, were likely sabotaged, crippling the oasis at its source. Within a year, the metropolis that had rivaled Rome was gone. In its place stood a hollowed-out shell, a minor garrison town on the empire's edge. The vibrant, multicultural heart of the desert stopped beating. The caravans found other routes, the merchants moved their operations, and the sand began its slow, patient work of reclaiming the stones. Palmyra's spirit was not just broken, it was erased, its final secret being that its glorious independence could only ever end in absolute, unforgiving ruin. The sands that slowly buried Palmyra for centuries could not prepare it for the swift brutality of modern erasure. In 2015, a new enemy arrived at the gates, one not interested in conquest or taxes, but in total annihilation. The terrorist group known as ISIS unleashed a calculated campaign of cultural genocide, systematically destroying the very monuments that had defied time. Their primary targets were the heart and soul of the ancient city. The majestic temple of Bel, which had stood for nearly 2,000 years, was blown to pieces. The iconic Arch of Triumph, that lone stone arch which had become a symbol of Palmyra's endurance, was reduced to rubble. This was not collateral damage from a battle, it was a deliberate, filmed demolition, a performance of hatred designed for the world to see. The ideology driving this destruction was a warped interpretation that viewed pre-Islamic history as idolatrous, a sinful distraction from their rigid doctrine. By erasing Palmyra, they sought to obliterate a testament to cultural fusion, to wipe clean a past that celebrated diversity and human achievement. The global outcry was immediate and profound. Archaeologists, governments, and ordinary people around the world watched in horror as millennia of history were vaporized in seconds. This modern tragedy reveals a chilling secret: the battle for Palmyra was never truly over. The same forces of intolerance and destruction that felled Zenobia simply adopted a new name. The stones that had survived Roman vengeance and centuries of desert winds now fell to bulldozers and dynamite. Yet, from this devastation, a new kind of resistance was born. How do you rebuild what has been turned to dust? The answer lies in the most modern tools imaginable, and a global determination to ensure that some secrets are never entirely lost. Even as modern explosives sought to erase its memory, Palmyra has a stubborn way of revealing its truths. The city is now the focus of a global rescue mission, one that uses 21st century technology to peer into its past without disturbing a single grain of sand. High-resolution satellite imagery scans the desert from orbit, revealing the faint outlines of buried streets and buildings invisible from the ground. Even more powerful is LiDAR, a laser scanning technology that can be deployed from an aircraft. It fires millions of laser pulses at the ground, penetrating sparse vegetation to create a precise three-dimensional map of the terrain below. This digital eye can detect the subtle rise of a buried wall or the gentle dip of an ancient canal, revealing the complete urban plan of the city and its sprawling suburbs. These tools allow archaeologists to make discoveries without ever lifting a trowel, protecting the fragile site while expanding our understanding of its true scale. This digital resurrection is matched by a physical one. International teams working with Syrian experts have undertaken the heartbreaking yet hopeful task of reconstruction. Using a method known as anastylosis, they carefully gather the shattered pieces of fallen columns and arches. Like the world's most difficult jigsaw puzzle, each numbered stone is examined and, where possible, returned to its original place. The work is painstakingly slow, relying on centuries-old craftsmanship combined with modern engineering, but it sends a powerful message that destruction is not the final word. Perhaps the most poignant effort lies in the creation of perfect digital copies. Using thousands of high-definition photographs taken by tourists and researchers before the destruction, specialists have built incredibly detailed three-dimensional models of the lost monuments. You can now put on a virtual reality headset and walk through the Temple of Bel as it stood just a decade ago, your digital footsteps echoing in a space that no longer physically exists. These virtual archives ensure that even if the stones are gone, the memory, the proportions, and the sheer grandeur of Palmyra are preserved forever, a digital seed bank for a lost cultural ecosystem. The city's final secret may be its resilience, its refusal to be silenced, proving that some stories are too powerful to ever be fully erased. Palmyra's commercial empire stretched far beyond the dusty tracks of the Silk Road. While the caravans are legendary, a deeper secret lies in the city's mastery of the sea. Inscriptions and scattered archaeological finds reveal a network of Palmyran merchant colonies planted like flags across the ancient world. We have evidence of their presence on the island of Bahrain in the Arabian Gulf, a vital hub for the pearl trade. Their names appear on records from ports on the west coast of India. Astonishingly, there was even a permanent community of Palmyran traders living in Rome itself, a distant embassy for the desert kingdom within the very heart of the empire it would later challenge. These were not just visitors, they were established businessmen dealing in goods that never saw the inside of a camel's pack. The sea routes offered access to an entirely different class of luxury. From the Gulf came the most perfect pearls, fished from deep, warm waters and considered the finest in the world. From the Indian ports came massive quantities of black pepper, a spice so valuable it was often used as collateral for loans alongside precious gems and exotic hardwoods. These goods traveled on ships that sailed the monsoon winds, a seasonal clockwork that Palmyran merchants learned to exploit with perfect timing. They would ship goods down to Egyptian ports on the Red Sea, transfer them to vessels that caught the summer monsoon east to India, and return with the winter winds, their holds filled with riches. This maritime web transformed our understanding of Palmyra. It was never just a desert caravanserai, a passive stop on a land route. It was the corporate headquarters of a truly globalized enterprise, a trading house with branch offices spanning thousands of miles. They managed a complex intermodal system where spices from India could arrive by ship, be transported by camel to their warehouses, and then be sold to Roman buyers who never left the city. This dual mastery of both desert and sea is what created a titan, a commercial entity whose influence rippled from the markets of China to the forums of Rome, all orchestrated from an oasis in the middle of nowhere. That constant diplomatic dance between two superpowers left its mark on everything, from the cut of a nobleman's cloak to the very titles he used. While Palmyra officially faced west towards Rome, its cultural soul was constantly pulled eastward, drawn into the orbit of the powerful Persian empires. For centuries, the city's rulers performed a delicate balancing act, pledging loyalty to Rome while their art, fashion, and political language whispered of a deep, enduring connection to Persia. You can see this secret influence carved in stone on the funerary busts. Look closely at the statues of Palmyran men. They are not wearing Roman togas. Instead, they are clad in the distinct, heavy trousers and long, belted tunics of the Parthian and Sasanian nobility. Their cloaks are fastened with elaborate brooches on the shoulder, a Persian style that would have looked foreign and exotic in the forums of Rome. Even the women's elaborate headdresses with their intricate folds and draped veils echo fashions from the Persian court. This was not merely an aesthetic choice, it was a political statement. Dressing in Persian style was a quiet declaration of identity, a way to signal their cultural and economic ties to the East, the very source of their caravan wealth. This cultural fusion extended into the realm of power and titles. When Palmyra's most powerful king, Odenathus, crushed a Persian army and marched to the gates of Ctesiphon, he did not take a humble Roman title. He proclaimed himself King of Kings, the sacred and traditional title of the Persian emperors themselves. This was an audacious act, a direct borrowing from the Eastern imperial playbook to elevate his status in the eyes of both his own people and his Roman allies. It was a title that resonated with power and ancient legitimacy in the East, far more than any Latin designation could. This constant pull from both sides defined Palmyra's foreign policy. The city's survival depended on its ability to navigate the bitter rivalry between Rome and Persia. It had to be just Roman enough to secure military support and trading rights in the West, but just Persian enough to keep the caravan routes open and secure safe passage through the eastern territories. They were masterful double agents of commerce and diplomacy, playing both empires against each other to maintain their precious independence. This delicate equilibrium worked for generations, but it was a dance on a knife's edge. When the music finally stopped with Zenobia's revolt, the Eastern influences that had once been a source of strength became, in the eyes of Rome, a mark of treachery and alien allegiance. Another temple stood as a testament to the city's layered soul, the sanctuary of Bolshemin. This was not the work of a single generation, but a secret architectural chronicle built over centuries. Its foundations were ancient, rooted in a simple, open-air altar from a time before the grand colonnades, dedicated to the Canaanite Lord of the Heavens. As Palmyra grew richer, the temple transformed. A grand stone cella, the inner chamber, was added during the reign of Tiberius, a direct echo of Roman imperial influence. Decades later, a sprawling colonnaded courtyard was wrapped around it, a fashion straight from the pattern books of Syrian Hellenistic architecture. Each new wing and column was a chapter in the city's story, a physical record of shifting allegiances and evolving tastes. The temple began as a purely Eastern holy site, was formalized under Roman patronage, and was finally monumentalized with a cosmopolitan blend of styles. This slow, centuries-long construction was a barometer of Palmyra's political climate. An inscription from the 1st century AD even records a dedication to the Roman Emperor Tiberius alongside Bolshemin himself, a careful public nod to the distant power that allowed the local god to thrive. The temple's very stones were a diplomatic act, balancing local devotion with imperial politics. Its final, magnificent form was a dialogue between East and West, frozen in architecture. And then, in our own time, that dialogue was violently silenced. In 2015, militants deliberately detonated explosives within the temple, pulverizing the cella and reducing the colonnades to a field of broken pillars. The long, patient work of generations was erased in an instant. Today, the original form of the Temple of Bolshemin is a ghost, a puzzle of scattered fragments. Its greatest secret is no longer just its layered past, but the immense challenge of ever piecing that story back together again. Beyond the grand statues of merchants and the silent tombs, the city's true secret was the vibrant hum of its daily life. For every queen and caravan lord, there were thousands of ordinary people who called this desert metropolis home. Their world was a fascinating mix of the mundane and the magnificent, where local traditions blended with global imports in the shadow of towering monuments. A typical Palmyran house was not a grand palace, but a comfortable, inward-facing home built around a central courtyard. This shaded open space was the heart of family life, where children played and the household gathered to escape the relentless sun. The walls were often painted with simple geometric patterns or floral motifs, a touch of color in a landscape of sand and stone. The food on their plates told the story of their unique position. A family might dine on flatbread baked from local wheat and dates from their own oasis groves, but season their stew with precious black pepper that had traveled by ship from India. They drank wine from vineyards watered by the hidden qanats, and wealthy merchants might even serve fish sauce, a fermented delicacy imported all the way from Spain. This was a cuisine born from a crossroads where the everyday met the exotic. The clothing people wore was a public declaration of their place in this complex society. An artisan would wear a simple, practical tunic of linen or wool, while a wealthy merchant's wife, as shown in her funerary bust, would be draped in layers of fine, translucent silk, her arms heavy with bronze and glass-bangled bracelets from Egypt or Syria. Even a soldier home from duty might wear a mix of his Roman military belt with the comfortable, baggy trousers favored by Eastern cavalry. Social life pulsed through the city's many public spaces. Inscriptions tell us of countless religious festivals, banquets, and gatherings. A carpenter named Zabda might save for months to contribute to his clan's feast in honor of the god Bel, sharing roasted lamb and wine with hundreds of fellow tribesmen in the temple courtyard. In the bustling agora, a Greek merchant could be heard haggling over the price of incense with a Palmyran trader, their transaction facilitated by a slave who interpreted between Aramaic and Greek. This was the hidden rhythm of Palmyra, a city where a soldier, a slave, a weaver, and a spice merchant all navigated their days in a vibrant, noisy, and incredibly diverse community, building a life together in the unlikeliest of places. Gold and silver became the canvas for her rebellion. In the final years of her rule, Zenobia commanded the mints of Alexandria to produce a stunning declaration of power, coins that carried a secret message across the known world. These were not mere currency, they were portable propaganda designed to legitimize her dynasty and shatter the Roman monopoly on imperial imagery. On one side, she placed the profile of her young son, Vabilathus, whom she had declared Augustus, the supreme emperor. He was depicted with the classic trappings of Roman power, a laurel wreath crowning his head, his features rendered in the solemn, mature style reserved for Caesars. It was a deliberate visual argument, screaming that this boy from the desert was the equal of any man in Rome. The flip side was even more audacious. There, the emperor's mother gazed out, but she was not titled as a mere queen. The Greek inscription identified her as Zenobia Augusta, Empress Zenobia. She wore a royal diadem, a band of cloth tied at the back, a symbol of Hellenistic monarchy that predated Rome itself. This was a brilliant fusion, a calculated blend of East and West. The Greek language appealed to the cultured, ancient heart of the Eastern Mediterranean, while the Palmyran Aramaic script on some issues whispered directly to her power base, the merchant princes and tribal leaders of her homeland. Every detail was a calculated risk. By minting coins in the captured province of Egypt, she was physically controlling the economic lifeblood of the Roman world while broadcasting her own authority. A merchant in Antioch, a sailor in Rhodes, or a senator in Rome himself could hold one of these coins and see the unthinkable, a Palmyran family claiming the purple. This was more than a financial instrument. It was a sovereign challenge struck in precious metal, a silent herald announcing that a new empire had risen in the East. The Roman response to this monetary insurrection was as swift as it was predictable, ensuring these coins would become some of the rarest and most poignant relics of a dream that burned too brightly. The Roman sack did not erase Palmyra from the minds of the people who inherited its land. As the city's stones cooled and its name faded in the West, a new guardian of its memory emerged, the Arab historians and geographers of the medieval Islamic world. They did not call her Zenobia, but knew her as Queen Al-Zaba, a figure who strode from the pages of history into the realm of epic legend. These scholars, traveling and writing centuries after the fall, preserved a vital secret, the living echo of Palmyra's defiance. In their accounts, the city was not a forgotten ruin, but a place of power and wonder, and its queen was transformed into a character of immense cunning and resolve. One famous tale describes Al-Zaba building a magnificent underground tunnel between her palace and a nearby fortress, a symbol of her cleverness and preparedness. Another story recounts how she defeated a rival king by tricking him into entering her city, then dropping a portcullis to trap his army, a narrative that captures the strategic genius the historical Zenobia was known for. These were not dry historical records, they were vibrant folklore, blending verified events with mythical embellishments, ensuring the story would be told and retold for generations. This was how Palmyra survived its own physical destruction. While Europe entered its so-called Dark Ages and forgot the Desert Queen, the Arab world kept her spirit alive, weaving her into their cultural tapestry as a symbol of intelligence, independence, and resistance. Geographers like al-Masudi and historians like al-Tabari recorded her tale, ensuring that the memory of the city and its warrior queen remained a potent local legend, a secret history passed down long before any European traveler would arrive with a sketchbook and a shovel to ask about the lonely archers in the desert. Zenobia was not a miraculous exception, but the ultimate expression of a powerful social secret. The true story of women's influence in Palmyra is carved into the stone portraits of its matriarchs. Look closely at a funerary bust of a woman from one of the city's great families. Her gaze meets yours directly, unflinching and confident. She is laden with wealth, wearing heavy, layered necklaces of carved stone pearls, intricate pendant earrings, and an elaborate headdress that signals her high status. This was not merely vanity, it was a public declaration of her legal and economic power. In Palmyra, a woman could own property in her own name. She could inherit vast fortunes from her father or husband, and she had the legal right to manage that wealth independently. This was a startling level of autonomy for the ancient world, a stark contrast to the more restricted lives of women in Rome or Greece. The proof is etched into the very monuments that made the city famous. Wealthy women regularly commissioned and paid for their own family tombs, those towering skyscrapers for the dead. They funded expensive public inscriptions celebrating their own achievements and their family's lineage. A woman named Amat, for instance, is immortalized in stone not just as a wife, but as the proud patron who financed a grand statue for the Temple of Bel. These women were not silent partners, they were active players in the city's commercial and social life. They controlled the wealth that built the colonnades and financed the caravans, their status woven directly into the economic fabric of the city. Why did this society grant women such unusual prominence? The answer may lie in its Bedouin tribal roots, where lineage and clan loyalty were paramount. In such a system, a woman was not just an individual, she was a vital link in the chain of a family's honor and legacy. Protecting her rights to inherit and manage property ensured the stability and continuity of the clan itself. When Zenobia took the throne, she was not overturning centuries of tradition. She was stepping into a role that Palmyran culture had, in its own unique way, been preparing for her all along. Her power did not emerge from a vacuum, but from a society that understood the strength a woman could wield. The city's wealth demanded walls that could stare down the desert itself. Palmyra's defenses were a masterclass in military geography, a layered secret of stone and sand. The city was cradled by a ring of low, rocky hills that provided a natural rampart against any approaching army, forcing enemies into narrow, predictable approaches where they could be easily spotted and harassed. But nature was only the first line of defense. The true ingenuity was in the man-made fortifications, a massive circuit of walls that snaked across the landscape, punctuated by formidable gates and sturdy watchtowers. These were not just barriers, they were a highly efficient security system for the world's most valuable traffic. The primary gates, like the Grand Damascus Gate, were not simple arches. They were complex, fortified structures with multiple chambers, heavy wooden doors reinforced with iron, and murder holes from which defenders could rain down projectiles on anyone trying to break through. From the watchtowers perched on the highest points, sentries kept a constant vigil, their eyes scanning the shimmering horizon for the telltale dust clouds of a desert raiding party or the organized glitter of an imperial army. The security of the caravans was the city's highest priority. Before a single bale of silk entered the gates, it had to pass inspection at these outer posts, ensuring that no threat slipped in disguised as commerce. This constant state of alert was the price of being the richest oasis in the world. Every tribal chieftain in the desert knew of its treasures, and the rival empires of Rome and Persia always saw it as a prize. The city's military was not just a garrison, it was a permanent professional guard for a global economy. Centuries after Zenobia's fall, the Romans themselves reaffirmed this strategic truth. They built the camp of Diocletian directly atop the city's heart, a stark, rectangular fortress that housed a permanent legion. This was not a gesture of respect for a fallen rival, but a cold, hard military calculation. Even in its diminished state, the location of Palmyra was too vital to abandon. The camp's sheer, unadorned walls stood as a final testament to the city's enduring secret, that its greatest value was never just its gold, but the ground it stood upon. The golden chains that bound Zenobia may have been more symbol than shackle. After her capture, the warrior queen vanished into the fog of history, leaving behind one of antiquity's most stubborn mysteries. Did she end her days in a Roman prison or in a comfortable retirement? The ancient sources offer two starkly different endings. One popular account, written by the historian Zosimus, describes a dramatic scene. The captured queen, loaded with heavy, jeweled chains of gold, was forced to walk in Emperor Aurelian's magnificent triumph through the streets of Rome. She was the star prisoner in his victory parade, a living trophy proving his power had crushed the East's greatest rebel. This public humiliation was the traditional fate of enemy leaders, a final, brutal lesson in the price of defying Rome. Yet another tradition, preserved by the chronicler John Malolas, paints a surprisingly gentle picture. According to this version, Aurelian was so impressed by Zenobia's dignity and intellect that he spared her life. He granted her a luxurious estate near Tivoli, just outside Rome, where she lived out her days in peaceful, if gilded, exile. She supposedly married a Roman senator and faded into the comfortable obscurity of the Italian aristocracy. So which story is true? Most modern historians lean toward the triumph. A public victory parade was the ultimate political prize for a Roman emperor, and displaying the formidable queen who had seized Egypt and Anatolia would have been an irresistible spectacle. The villa near Tivoli feels more like a romantic legend, a satisfying end crafted for a larger-than-life figure. Yet the very existence of this gentler story reveals a profound secret about Rome's attitude. The empire respected strength even in a defeated foe. By allowing a narrative of honorable retirement to circulate, Roman culture was subtly acknowledging Zenobia's unique stature. She was not just another rebel to be executed and forgotten. She was a worthy adversary, a queen whose legend was so potent that even in defeat, she deserved a story befitting her grandeur. Her ultimate fate, whether in chains or in a sunlit villa, became her final victory, a mystery that ensures her name will never be forgotten. Zenobia's chains could not contain her story, for her legend began its long journey the moment she was led away from her ruined city. Long after the desert sands had reclaimed the stones of Palmyra, the memory of its queen refused to die, transforming from a historical figure into a timeless symbol. In the medieval Middle East, she was celebrated as the cunning Al-Zaba, a heroine of Arab folklore whose wisdom and strength became legendary, but her secret influence did not stop there. Centuries later, her story sailed west, captivating a Europe that was rediscovering classical history. The Italian writer Boccaccio included her in his famous collection On Famous Women, praising her chastity, intellect, and military genius, setting a template that would inspire artists and writers for generations. She became the ultimate muse, a canvas upon which every era could paint its own ideals. In the 17th century, she represented righteous defiance against tyranny. By the Romantic period of the 19th century, she was the tragic, exotic heroine, often depicted in paintings swooning in captivity or leading charges with flowing hair. Her appeal was so powerful it even filled grand opera houses. The composer Handel premiered his opera Zenobia in the 1730s, setting her tale to music for aristocratic audiences who saw in her a noble, if doomed, figure of enlightenment. Each retelling, whether in a Persian poem or an English play, polished a different facet of her myth. She was reshaped into a symbol of female empowerment long before the term existed, a beacon of Eastern wisdom challenging a decadent West, and an eternal emblem of resistance against impossible odds. The historical queen who ruled for only a few short years was gone, but the icon she became is truly immortal. Her name whispered on stages, painted on canvases, and written in books, forever echoing far beyond the sands that once were her home. From a single oasis to an empire that challenged Rome, the story of Palmyra is a breathtaking arc of human ambition. We have journeyed through 30 of its deepest secrets, from the hidden water channels that gave it life to the warrior queen who dared to forge her own destiny. We have seen how a city built on trade became a crucible of cultures, blending East and West in its art, its gods, and its very soul. Its grand colonnade stood as a testament to what humanity can achieve when bridges are built, not walls. Yet this legacy also carries a profound warning, a tragedy written in the dust of rebellion and the shock of modern explosives. Palmyra's voice was silenced not once but twice, a stark reminder that the treasures of our shared past are fragile. Its story does not end here in the ruins. It lives on in every effort to rebuild its arches, in every digital model that preserves its memory, and in our own choice to listen. The world is still full of such irreplaceable sites, each holding secrets that connect us all. You can be a part of protecting that heritage. Seek out the stories of these endangered places, share what you have learned, and add your voice to the chorus that insists our history matters. We would love to hear from you. Which of Palmyra's 30 secrets captivated you the most? Tell us in the comments.